Hi everyone. Before we go into the podcast, I just wanted to say thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I'm super grateful for your continued loyalty and support. If you could do me a quick favour, if you could give me a review on Apple Podcasts, it really helps the algorithm and it will help this podcast go up the lists. If there are any subjects or topics that you want me to cover, then please do reach out to me on DM on LinkedIn, and I will do my best to find the best guest for that subject or topic. This is the Absolute Business Mindset podcast, created and hosted by Mark Hayward. This podcast will interview entrepreneurs, business owners, and careerists. We will delve into their journey to success, key life milestones, and go deep into their area of expertise. Get ready to learn from other successes and failures. Today we have Marty Fahncke, who is a business investor, adventurist marketer, entrepreneur with 30 years success of growing companies. Hello, Marty. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me on your show, Mark.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining me. So we're going to go through the 4 E's, which is education, experience, expertise, and future endeavors. So let's start with your education. So what was your sort of high school like, and particularly why you decided to go into your endeavors without doing a degree?
Well, your 4 E's are going to be very interesting because just like a desired bar graph of revenues that increases, this is going to be more interesting as we go, because my education is not very interesting, but my future endeavors will be, hopefully. So
Awesome.
We'll go from there. So from an education standpoint, I did not attend university. I actually started my first business when I was 14. And when I was 16 years old, I started in the direct response marketing business at a call center. And I was working minimum wage, taking calls for people who had seen items on TV and they were calling to order them, and I was taking those orders. And it was very quick from there. I realized that was not where I wanted to be. Of course, I was, a teenager, but I looked around and I actually did some math one day, and I recognized that I was making $3.35 an hour, but I was selling $10,000 an hour in product.
Right.
And I said to myself, there's a big gap here, and I want to find where it was. And the story is actually pretty interesting of how I progressed from being on the call center front lines to, within not too many years, being an executive at one of the largest direct marketing agencies in the world. And then a few years after that, growing from scratch the largest infomercial company in the world, which we grew from 0 to $300 million in 3 years. So my education came from doing.
Right.
Now, I am not an uneducated person. I'm a voracious reader. I have studied everything from the classics to the currents, and I consider myself very highly educated. I just don't have the sheepskin on the wall to prove it.
No, that's absolutely fine. I think for me, my degree taught or showed that I could learn rather than actually having anything useful, and my actual education in business came a bit later, and now I am keen on not being educated anymore, but do a lot of reading, do a lot of listening of podcasts and audio books, and fascinated by lots of different areas. So
it was interesting for me because by the time I was about 21, 22 years old, and after I was 22 years old, I was the director of a company that at that time was doing about $80 million a year.
Wow.
And my peers in my age group who were just finishing university were coming to work at that company. And I was their manager because I already had years of experience, and they came on board and they had the degree, but no experience. And so they were, I was leading teams full of people who had gone the traditional university route, but I've never regretted taking the path I took. I mean, it was forced upon me for various outside influences, but it's never been a hindrance to me at all in entrepreneurial ventures.
Awesome. So you've kind of mentioned where we were going to start with your experience. So you took on a sales presentation administrator role, which was selling materials on teleservices, and you took on sales roles as well. And then you took on director and founding of sales and marketing. But just on that sort of sales side, so one of the common threads that I find that a lot of successful people have been in sales or been involved in sales, and it gives you a level of resilience, a level of get up and go, and being able to keep on making those phone calls and keep planning to get those sales. Do you think it gave you a really good grounding for your later life?
Oh,
actually doing sales?
Absolutely. Thank you. Nobody's ever really asked me about this. So I was in sales on the phone selling. It was really order taking. It wasn't even sales. When I looked around and said, who's making the real money here? Who's making things happen and doing good things? I realized that the corporate sales department for my company, whose job it was to go and sell their services to other companies, I realized they were the ones that were driving the nice cars, wearing the nice suits, having a good time, traveling. And I said, that's what I want to be. So I jumped on my first opportunity to get into that department at the lowest level. And I was just really an assistant, but I was learning as I was working in that department. And I very quickly grew in the ranks there and eventually was on the team that landed. Then this was many years ago when DirecTV was very first starting out. We landed the DirecTV contract, which was handling all the customer service and all the billing and everything else. And I was one of 3 people that landed that contract, which went on to bill over $1 billion in billings for that company over the lifetime of that contract. Mm-hmm. So, here I am, I can't remember, 21-year-old, 20-year-old. I think I was 20 years old, I think, when that happened. Mm-hmm. I was 20 years old and closed $1 billion contract. Wow. I was very much keen that sales was a great pathway to success. And I sat down with a mentor of mine and I said, how can I get to be the account executive, the guy leading that team? And he said, you need more experience and you need more knowledge. And he recommended that I go and sell real estate on the side. He said, you'll get some really interesting street level sales experience. And I said, okay, I'll do it. So I went, signed up as a real estate agent, started selling real estate, did pretty well for a year. And then a really advanced real estate educational program came along. It was like a 6-month program, and it was like a boot camp. Mm-hmm. And one of the aspects of the boot camp was that you had to dial 100 cold calls every single day of this 6-month boot camp. Right. That was one. There was lots to learn, but that was one of the things. If I'm going to pay for an education, I'm going to follow what the people teach me. So I said, okay, you tell me to dial 100 calls a day, I'm going to dial 100 calls a day. So that's what I did. And within that 6 months, I became in the top 3% of real estate agents in my state.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it techniques I was learning in the sales process? Yes. But I attribute the majority of that to dialing 100 phone calls every single day and getting told no 99 times a day. But the cool thing was almost every day I got at least one yes. That taught me the tenacity and what it takes, and that sales is a numbers game. It also taught me about the nature and psychology of marketing and selling, because I was going to somebody's home and sitting down with them at the kitchen table and talking about listing their home or helping them find a new home and all of the nuances that go with that, and dealing with people solving huge problems. I mean, you're dealing with people making what is generally the largest investment of their entire lives. Yeah. And so there's a lot of emotions involved. There's a lot of financing involved. There's a lot of third parties involved, a lot of negotiation that has to happen, wrinkles that have to be smoothed out. So I learned an awful lot from doing that for a couple of years. Now, again, I was doing that on the side. That was part-time. I was making 100 cold calls a day. In addition to my 10 hours a day, I was working at my regular job. On my birthday, I believe it was my 21st birthday, or was 23rd birthday. I was driving to work in my corporate job, which I was enjoying, but I wasn't making a ton of money there. I was actually making more money on my side business. And I said, why am I doing this? So I drove in and I sat down with my mentor, who was the vice president at the time. And I said, remember how you told me to go do real estate? And he's like, yeah. And I said, it's working out really great. So I quit. But so I'm forever grateful to him, and we're still friends to this day. But the things I learned have helped me not only in marketing, which is really where I've focused a lot of my energy, and I've done over $1 billion in marketing directly to the consumer, because I understand what trigger points people have to making a purchase and the decision process and rationalizing and justifying the purchase in their minds, et cetera. But also in my mergers and acquisitions activities, which has become a greater focus of my business over the years. And I've done now about $300 million in mergers and acquisitions. And so you're talking about homes and real estate that might be $500,000. And now I'm negotiating deals that are in the millions of dollars. And I'm currently in the middle of two projects. One is a $175 million acquisition, and the other is a $30 million roll up. And so I've gone, but all of the same principles apply. You still have to meet the needs of the buyers, the sellers, the investors, the financiers. There's still problems that have to be ironed out. No matter what you're doing, the same skills I learned sitting at a kitchen table and working with a couple, terrified to make this huge decision, are the same skills I use today to close, tens of millions of dollar deals.
Fantastic. And am I right in saying that so you had a director of sales and marketing roles. You progressed very quickly, but am I right in saying that you were a founder of, is it a Conference Call University?
Yes, Conference Call University.
Was that your first business?
No, that was let's see. No, that was not my first business. My first business was a little sporting goods business that a friend of mine called up and said, hey, our friend Dave. I said, yeah, I know Dave. He said, well, he's invented this product, and I think it'll do well, and we need your marketing expertise, and we want to go and sell it. And okay. So we formed a company, and there were 3 of us partners, and we brought this little product to market. It was as grassroots as it can be. It was a soccer product, or football, I guess, for the international audience. And so my literal first steps was I had kids at that time who were 8, 9, 10 years old, in that range. And so when we were developing the product and developing the sales and marketing, I literally took my kids to the local parks, the local fields where kids were playing all day long, hundreds of them. And we would just demonstrate them. And I would talk to the parents, we would talk to the kids, and we would sell them at the park. And my kids loved it because I would pay them a commission. They were making really good money. But what I was doing was learning. I was understanding. I was testing price points. I was testing marketing messaging. I was testing, upselling. I found out that if I sell it to a parent with 2 kids, I'll probably sell 1 or 2. They might buy it and have it be shared, or they might buy 1 for each kid. But I learned that if I sell to grandparents, I'll sell 5. Because it was a perfect gift item. The grandparents are like, oh, I can take care of all the grandkids in one fell swoop. So I learned that out there, again, face to face. I took that learning and we put the product on television, both in traditional direct response television, but even more importantly, we put it on QVC. And because I had learned from that face-to-face sales and marketing interaction exactly how to sell the product was massively successful on QVC. And so we did a really great run on QVC, and about 18 months after we launched, we got an offer from a company to buy our business. And it was a very lovely 7-figure offer. And again, this was a hobby business that 3 guys just kind of started up. And so we said, sure, we took the cash and sold the business, and the product still exists to this day, but I took the money. So that was my very first foray into launching a business, making it be successful, and then selling that business for a profit. So
how did you make the materials? How did you make the stuff that you were selling?
We'll be back after a quick break.
Hi, I'm Alex, the host of X Health Show. Meet the future of healthcare. Think X-Men, that's X Health. Actual superheroes behind programming living cells to cure cancer once and for all. Tech that detects preterm delivery in seconds, brain-computer interface, or apps that employ AI to match you, your disease, with the best treatment. X Health Show brings to you visionaries who push the boundaries of healthcare from Switzerland, the heart of Europe, and the most innovative country in the world. Let me introduce you to their startups. Head to X Health Show, meet the future of healthcare. Happy to greet you there.
At first, so I was in charge of the marketing, and then the other partner was in charge of the manufacturing and operations. The first batch we made were made in China, and they were really terrible, and we were not impressed. We moved manufacturing to Mexico, Maquiladora, and the quality improved substantially. The time frame improved substantially because we didn't have to wait for it to be on the water for 30 days. And et cetera. So I had not a lot to do with the manufacturing side of things. We continually improved the designs. We continually improved the manufacturing quality. We continually improved the product for every order we placed got better and better. My job was just to sell the heck out of it, which I did. So
Awesome. And that was while you were working as well? Was it?
I never have only one thing going on at a time ever.
Okay. So tell me about this directory for website and webinars and video conferencing.
So Conference Call University, I started in 2005, and it was actually, it was not, I had no intention of starting that business. Actually, I rarely have any intention of starting any businesses I start. They just kind of happen, which is, I think, part of why they're so successful, because I'm following a trend. But Conference Call University was leveraging a trend that was in 2004, 2005. There was a huge marketplace for teleseminars. Now, at that time, we didn't have Zoom. We didn't have webinar. We had GoToWebinar, but it was really kind of corporate. But there was a huge industry in, especially the internet marketing space and the information marketing space online, for teleseminars. And I worked with one of the gurus of that space who really built a kind of an industry around that. And I was doing quite well in producing my own, but I realized there was a need for a directory and a place where people can market, because people could produce them, but they weren't getting a lot of traffic. So I created Conference Call University, and it really had two functions. Number one was to produce teleseminars for third parties. And two was, it was at that time the world's largest directory and marketing platform for others who were producing their own teleseminars. So I started that business in 2005, continued to grow. We produced some we had teleseminars with up to 30,000 people on them. Teleseminars launched some really successful businesses. Some people on this podcast, there's a PR and publicity source called Help a Reporter, or HARO, that we use teleseminars with Peter Shankman to really launch that business. So that business I ran for 3 years or 4 years, I think 4 years. And then I got an offer from somebody to purchase it, and I sold that business as well. So, and then the kind of the teleseminar world kind of changed, and that kind of went away, and it was really a lot more focused on webinars, and recurring webinar or evergreen webinars is really a big business model in the online marketing space, and then of course Zoom came along and really transformed the distance learning and virtual meetings and all that kind of stuff. And the radical change we've seen in the last couple of years has been fascinating. I suspect that business, that the owner who bought it from me, unfortunately drove it into the ground and no longer exists. And I suspect that they would have, if they could have kept it going until last year, until 2020, I suspect there could have been a huge opportunity to consolidate a lot of what's happening in the virtual meeting world, but they drove it into the ground. And a couple of years after, I noticed it went out of business a couple of years after I sold it. So
okay, so there's lots of different ways I can go on this. One of the things that you said earlier on about when you were selling the sports gear and you were consciously thinking about upselling, cross-selling, how to think about price point. So there is a lot of conscious thought that you're going into about how you market, how you sell to people.
absolutely.
And that it sounds like that was all learned, or part of it learned with the real estate and stuff like that. But how do you approach, is the methodology now as a marketer, experienced marketer, versus how you were doing it then? Has that changed, or is it literally this core element that you learn of in real estate, that it's persistence, it's trying things, it's experimenting, it's pitching, it's thinking about things? It seems a lot of conscious thought through what you're doing there.
You ask really wonderful questions. I do a lot of podcast interviews, and a lot of the questions are the kind of the same questions, and you're asking very unique questions. So thank you for making my wheels really have to turn here.
That's my pleasure.
So I think part of it was taught just because like I said, it all probably stemmed from my sales and marketing experience, and very early in my career that was very scripted and kind of, robotic and objection, overcome objection, etc. But I think a lot of it has been really my curiosity about human nature and psychology. I am very much in tune with understanding or the desire to understand the people I work with. So I'll give you another example. What year was this? 06, 07, I think, somewhere, I don't know. I'm a huge hockey fan. Huge hockey fan. And the team that I grew up watching play hockey was purchased by a person who promised that he wouldn't sell the team and he would keep it local. And he broke his promise about 2 years later and sold the team. And we had no hockey no professional hockey where I lived. Couple of years later, a professional hockey team came in. They were a great team. I was a season ticket holder. I absolutely loved it. We, my family all went, friends, like it was a huge thing for us. After a few years, though, I noticed a very sharp decline in attendance. And I read an article in the paper that said that the owners of the team were thinking about selling it because it was not profitable. So I called the owners and I said, I understand you're thinking about selling the team. I would really like to do whatever I can to prevent you from doing that. If it's a money thing, let me take a look at it and see if I can help you salvage the team and keep it here. And they were like, well, who are you? And I had to sell them on that I could do this. But here's what I did. So first of all, I wanted to understand the operations of the team itself. And I wanted to do it in a way that I could get honest information. So I had them hire me as a ticket sales rep. So nobody knew that I was actually there to save the team. They thought I was a ticket sales rep making $7 an hour plus commission. And I went in there and guess what I did every day? I cold called. So I cold called, dialed 100 dials a day to sell hockey tickets to season ticket or past ticket holders, corporate accounts, etc. I very quickly found some really great ways to sell tickets that nobody on the team had thought of, and recognize some ways that we could be selling a lot more tickets. I also identified, because I was this brand new guy, low man on the totem pole, just a $7 an hour cold caller, people will talk near that person as if they aren't there. So I learned an awful lot just by listening to people in that office. And I learned where the problems were and who the problems were. The next thing I did is I went to the owners and I said, okay, I've figured out one part of the problem. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to spend the next several games sitting in the seats and just listening to the fans. So I did that. And all I did was go out. They didn't know I was an employee. I just went out and I would change seats every quarter, every period. And I would talk people up and I would understand what the fans wanted. And I very quickly learned that what the fans wanted and what the owners thought they wanted were two very different things.
Right.
But the owners did not know that because they never asked the fans.
Right.
So after a month, the owners flew in. They were out of state owners. The owners flew in, called everybody in a meeting. I had presented my findings, and they basically installed me as the interim general manager of the team.
Right.
And I will never forget the look on a couple of people's faces when they realized that guy's going to fire me because of what I've done in front of him and what I've said in front of him, not knowing who he really was. I'm probably going to get fired. And guess what? They were right. I fired them that day.
Right.
Instantly, morale improved, productivity improved. I rearranged the way the tickets were being done. I rearranged the sales process. And most importantly, I made some huge recommendations to the owners. We literally changed leagues based on my recommendation because they were very proud of the fact that they were in a one notch below the NHL. So that they were, and I don't know, international, there's like in the hockey or in baseball, there's the major leagues, and below that you'll have AAA, AA, single A.
So sort of like a second division, sort of
like a second division. So they were very proud of the fact that they were on the second tier of professional hockey. And the problem was they were one of the worst teams on that. And what was interesting is that the level, the players that you had in that, because they were on a kind of a reserve team, you had two things happening. You had players who were on probation from their team and had been booted down or were recovering from an injury or whatever, and they had very little motivation to actually play hard. Or you had players who were on the verge of retirement and they were just finishing out a contract. The bottom line, the play on the ice wasn't that great. But if we dropped one tier down below that to the AA level, the play is completely different because you have young up and coming players who are trying to make it to the big leagues and they've got something to prove. And the energy level is completely different. And I said, if you drop down one league level, not only will it improve the performance and the play on the ice, which is what your fans want, but it should make you more competitive, which is what your fans want. And it will save you over $1 million in franchise fees and travel fees because the one lower level is more regionally based and you can do a lot more bus rather than airplane travel. I said, so you will make more money and save more money. And the owners agreed, and they literally changed leagues, and that team is still there today, and I still attend games. And so,
what's the team called? Just give it a shout out.
That's the Utah Grizzlies hockey team.
Right.
So, so it's a long answer to your question of, where has the kind of looking for, from a marketing and sales standpoint, looking for what the customer wants, where is that? Is that always been there? Yes, it's always been there and always be there. Everything I do, I start with what's the need and what's the want of the customer. And it continues to this day. So, yeah.
Fantastic. All right, we're going to jump around to another thing. You've mentioned about selling businesses, that you've sold a few businesses.
Yeah.
Are you actually better now at selling a business than you were your first business?
Oh, heck yeah. Oh my goodness. I made a huge mistake in selling our first business. And here's why. And I didn't really, this is just something I realized in the last couple of months. The company that bought our company offered us, well over $1 million. And when it's an 18-month-old business, we're young, $1 million. Let's, it was $1.3 million, I think, or $1.3 million, $1.4 million, I can't remember. It was just under $1.5 million. So we were like, thought that was all the money in the world. And they just paid us cash and we walked away. Had we negotiated for stock, either all or in part of the company that purchased us, if we'd have taken all stock from that company, we would have made, and then sold that stock today, we would have had $24 million.
Wow.
And so now at the time, I would have, even if you'd have told me I should do that, I probably would have said, no, it's too much risk. But I understand so much more now that I probably would have negotiated 50-50. I would have negotiated half in cash and half in stock, because that was a turn, that business got sold, and that business got sold and eventually got rolled up into a major sporting goods company, a major public sporting goods company that I would own, hundreds of thousands of shares in. And so that's one of the biggest mistakes I made, was I just didn't know. And also, we probably sold too early. Had we waited even another 6 months, it probably would have been worth much more. We had some really good cash flow going, and the EBITDA would have been much stronger. We would have sold for much, much more. So, a lot of things. We were very naive in that very first one. My second business that I sold, that one I did much better. I got a premium price for it, and I sold a good clean business. I'm sad that the owner that took it over didn't make it last more than 2 years, but what can I do? So I've gotten much better on the mergers and acquisitions side, for sure, whether it's selling business or buying businesses, at understanding the dynamics and how to do it better, how to do it more advantageous to me, my partners, whoever I'm working with, or my clients. And because I've been involved in so many deals now, I've got obviously experience breeds success. So
Absolutely. We could probably spend a whole episode talking about mergers and acquisitions and
I love talking about mergers and acquisitions. So
okay, well, we may come back to it later on. We've got a lot to cover, and I want to cover a couple of specific things. So I want to talk about Adventurist Marketer. So what is one? And we talked before we came on about retreats and the importance of these sorts of things. I hope these things are sort of intertwined. But what is an Adventurist Marketer?
So the Adventurist Marketer is my brand that I came up with. Actually, I didn't come up with it. Here's a key thing. I am a top-notch marketer. I don't feel boastful or saying that. I'm a good marketer. I've done, billions of dollars, but players have coaches. I'm getting back to a sports analogy. Like, even if you're the greatest player in the world in any field, you still have a coach. So when it came time for me to kind of rebrand my business, I brought in a third party, a coach, who looked at what I was doing and said, really, you're a glorified consultant and, strategic advisor. Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a million consultants and strategic advisors out there, and they're all the same. And it actually started with, I wanted to build a new website. And so she was like, okay, well, go find some websites that are what you want, and then we'll see what we can do. And as I was starting to look through websites from all of the other marketing consultants and strategic, business advisors out there, I realized every single one of them looked exactly the same. Every single one of them had the exact same words on it. Every single one of them had the exact same pictures, sometimes literally the exact same pictures, because they use stock photographs. And it's just like, you could not tell one from the other. And I thought, how can you be a self-proclaimed marketing expert or marketing consultant and have such plain vanilla generic marketing for yourself? So I realized, there had to be something different. So with the help of my business coach, she said, one thing that sets you apart is the fact that you do a lot of your business not in an office, not in a normal arrangement, but you do a lot of your business outdoors on adventures, whether it's taking doing business retreats at skiing, whitewater rafting, fishing, paragliding, or is this background I have behind me is a private island in the Florida Keys. She said, what if you tied that to your brand? What if that's part of your business and you actually formalized it as a business model? I'd had it there as just a thing I do for years, but I had never formalized it as, if I'm doing an annual planning meeting with one of my clients, is it going to be more effective 3 days in a boardroom Or is it going to be more effective doing a ropes course where the people have to, a high ropes course where the people have to trust each other. They're putting their lives in each other's hands, literally by holding, belaying the ropes and pushing themselves to physical and mental exhaustion. And then the next day, sitting around a campfire, staring into the sparks and the coals, and coming up with the next creative ideas for that business. And I will tell you that beyond a shadow of a doubt, the answer is get out in nature. And I actually have, when I began to think about that as my business model, I started doing research. There are study after study after study that prove that being in nature makes you more creative, increases your communication with others, increases your ability to collaborate and coordinate, and very important in today's day and age, boosts your immune system. Just the fact of being outside. Now, does every adventure have to be, climbing a 14er or whitewater rafting? No. We've done adventures that are as simple as group bike rides or, croquet in the park. I mean, sometimes it doesn't have to be a grand scale adventure, but I will say that the events I hold that are higher sort of danger level or adrenaline level do seem to be more productive because, when people are working together in some sort of stressful environment or some sort of pressured environment, they tend to go through the 4 stages of team building, right? Which is totally slipped my mind. They're burned into my brain, and all of a sudden I can't think of the 4 stages of team building. But anyway, but from that standpoint of being, not working together, the stress and there's argument, and then they eventually gel together. If you're having to do teamwork to get down a whitewater river, and if somebody paddles wrong, you could literally flip your raft and die. Guess how well that team works together by the end of that day? Mm-hmm. They work great together. Mm-hmm. So then you take that and say, okay, guys, this is what we're going to do with the company. What's the plan? What's our quarterly plan? What are our quarterly rocks? What is our annual rocks? What's our vision? And the things that come out of them after a day like that are night and day what would come out of them after sitting in a boardroom for 8 hours eating donuts and drinking coffee.
It's really interesting. It's really interesting approach to it. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about your expertise in marketing, and I've got a couple of questions within that.
Oh, sorry, I have to interrupt. Storming, norming, performing, transforming, I think are the 4 stages. Anyway.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
There's certain people who, if they watch this interview, they are going to massacre me for not getting it right. I might have to not let them see this interview. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
One of the things when I was doing some reading about you were talking about designing growth strategies and how you do that with marketing. Can you just sort of explain to me, so growth strategies for maybe a startup or maybe a small business or something like that? How would you approach that from a marketing perspective side?
So a couple of things. A lot of entrepreneurial businesses that I work with tend to be a business that is 5 to 7 years old. Well, it's 5 to 10 years old with an average, say, around 7 years old. And the owners of those businesses tend to hit a point where they plateau. A lot of successful businesses plateau about every 5 to 7 years. Hmm. And the reason that they plateau is sort of burnout to some degree, but more just doing the same thing over and over again because that's always worked and we're going to continue doing it. And the energy level of the owner of that company will tend to ebb and flow throughout the cycle of the business. And they generally hit an ebb at around, 7 years or so. And so a couple of things that we'll do to come into a business and help it grow again. And we can work with a business that's on the decline, or we can work with a business that's plateaued, or we can work with a business that's still growing, but just not growing at the level it should be. So first of all, we're going to look at processes and reporting. So many businesses that I work with will go into, and there are very few processes in place because they've been kind of doing things by the seat of their pants. When you take a business that started out as one guy in a spare room or one guy in a garage, and then it kind of just grows as he needs it, and it's very difficult to build a lot of good processes. And quite often I'll come into a business like that and find out that they don't have a clue what their numbers are. They don't know most of their KPIs, or they're looking at the wrong KPIs. So the first thing we'll do is help them to build out dashboards so that their KPIs can be measured. And we help them solve what are the right KPIs to be looking at. Mm-hmm. And then we start measuring those KPIs. And that dashboard is, I use two different business operating systems, a hybrid of both. So one is the EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and the other one is the Gazelles system, or the Rockefeller Habits system. And I've taken bits and pieces of both of those and combined them together.
So to go across you, is EOS from Traction?
Yes. Yes. That's the Traction. Yep.
Yeah.
And then the Gazelles is from Rockefeller Habits. So
okay.
Burn Harnish. So there are wonderful things about both of those systems. And there are a couple of things I hate about both of those systems. And so I've just kind of put the two together, taking the best pieces. So the dashboard is really from Rockefeller Habits and the Gazelles. So every business I work with will build out a dashboard that literally has all the KPIs in a dashboard that has red, yellow, and green against the numbers based on our goals and objectives. So at any time, 24 hours a day, the executives, owners, whoever, the people need to be involved in the business who are making decisions can look at the dashboard and see if there's red, you've got a real problem. If there's yellow, that's an indicator, that something needs to be looked at and improved. And if there's green, how do you leverage that? Most businesses, and especially businesses that are under, 5 to 7 years old, don't have anything like that. That which you measure improves. So that's step one, is identify your KPIs and measure them. Many businesses don't do it. Step two is, again, going back to the adventurous marketing standpoint, is let's go find out what the real goals of the business are, the real goals of the owner are, and the real goals of the executive team are, and understand where we really want to take this to. Because growth for growth's sake isn't always the best thing. It can lead to many entrepreneurs, especially, have a threshold of a business that once it hits a certain level, they aren't in a capacity to run that business. They might be more of the starter mindset. So yes, they may be great at starting a business and getting it up to $5 million, but anything over $5 million, they literally can't handle it. And so I had a company, a client that I had a few years ago, and he had a business that he'd had for 15 years. And it was great for the first 10 years. And the last 5 years was a struggle. It had plateaued. It had been kind of up and down, and it sort of plateaued at a certain level. And I did a complete assessment. And I'll never forget, I was driving down the 405 in Los Angeles with him. And I said, the answer to growing your business is you need to sell it. You cannot grow this business yourself. And you have other passions in other places. And I'm not exaggerating. He wept. The thought of selling this business that he had spent 15 years building was terrifying to him. But the reality was, he had hit a plateau or hit a ceiling, and he was never going to break through with that. And there were some specific reasons why. We did eventually sell the business. He retained part of it, so he kept some ownership shares in it. So he didn't sell 100% of it, but he sold like 80% of it. The new people who took that business over have increased it by 6-fold. So he's making more money now today being an absentee owner than he was making when he was trying to run the thing. He took the money that he took from that and started something else that was in his passion wheelhouse, and has grown that about to the same size, and he's stuck there again.
But it's really interesting, because as you say, the entrepreneur might not be the person who can scale a business, and it sounds
Right.
like that you're talking around building growth to be able to get a scale, and that is because actually you said about EOS. I've recently read Traction. I hadn't read Traction before.
Yeah, great book. I recommend everybody read that.
Absolutely, and it talks about building systems and processes to be able to automate and be able to measure what you're doing. And it was I thought the book was fantastic, and it's really interesting. I can also tell from personal experience of a friend of mine who is great at the startup. He's great at working at midnight, everyone pitching in to be able to deliver for tomorrow.
Oh yeah, the all night pizza, pizza driven crunch time. I mean, there's a lot of energy in that. There's a lot of people who thrive on that environment.
But he's got enough self-awareness to know that actually this business is getting too big for him and he needs to do something else. So
but many business owners do not have that self-awareness. And so one of the things I provide is a reality check. Man, I am a straight shooter. I just tell it like it is. Now try and be, soften the blow and be diplomatic. But if I firmly believe that the business owner is the problem with the business, I'm going to tell them.
Yeah.
And sometimes they agree with me and we do things to evolve it, and other times they don't, and that's fine. It's still the right answer. So we've had some where we didn't sell the business. They brought in a person to operate it. They brought in a new president or a new chief operating officer or whatever it is to take a lot. It doesn't, just because a business might have outgrown the entrepreneur that started it doesn't mean that they have to leave it. There are other ways of doing it, but it's really individualized. And the recommendation I made to this guy I was talking about was because I knew that he needed to leave that business for some different reasons. And it was the best thing that he ever did. It really was. So, but even myself, like there's a philosophical principle called Dunbar's number, which was a cultural anthropologist named Dunbar identified in, I believe it was baboons or chimpanzees. I can't remember. Anyway, some sort of primate that the groups of primates that exist in the wild, the family, there's the family unit, and then there's the actual kind of gang. And he realized that almost never did that exceed 150 members. And so he did some studying on that and then brought that back into human behavior and realized that there's a correlation there. And the reason why is because at 150, once you cross 150, you actually start to hit where you can't know every single person in your business. If you have more than 150 employees, you get to the point where if you're the owner, you can walk down the hall and see somebody who works for you who you don't know.
Yeah.
Once that happens, everything changes in your business. So I am very cognizant of that number. And I personally don't prefer to work with businesses that are over 150 employees for that reason, because then you have to have a much more rigid corporate structure. You've got to, that's when all the red tape starts and the rules and the siloing and everything else. And so I prefer to work with businesses that have 50 employees, and I'll help them grow to 150 employees. And then I'm out of there too. Because yes, I've done $1 billion businesses, but I don't want to be in charge of it. And I don't want to be the guy that's responsible for growing that. So if you have 5,000 employees right now, I'd love to help you with a marketing campaign, but I don't want to be in charge of your business.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because someone that I was listening to actually on Clubhouse was saying that when they had to employ a HR as well, that's a big changing point, because now people have to write down what's acceptable, what's unacceptable, and all those things that you might have a conversation down the pub with the boss about this person did this or this didn't work out. Suddenly everything's formalized and it changes the dynamic of the whole of the business.
Right. Which is great. I mean, and it needs to get to that point for the business to continue to grow. But generally, an entrepreneur, business owner, that transition is very difficult, and so they don't always survive. Matter of fact, they rarely survive that. They generally wind up bringing in new operators, and that's the point where some founders begin to lose control of their businesses because then they got to bring in capital, right? So they start, raising capital through PE firms or VC firms, and their shares start to get diluted, and lots of different things happen there. So that's why I'm a real big fan of, kind of the like I said, the 50 to 150 level employee business is my absolute sweet spot. I can work with any business, but that's my sweet spot.
Okay. Right. I want to be respectful of your time, and we might overrun slightly, but I just want to do the last two things. So the last one is future endeavors, which is the last of our E's. And then I've got 6 quick fire questions. They're a little bit thought-provoking, They don't need a quick answer, but they're there just to give, to have some quick questions. But I wanted to give enough time for your future endeavors. So tell me about what you still want to achieve, what you're still planning for now.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for that. So right now I've got a couple of areas of focus. So number one, I'm working on a very large deal, also in the sporting goods industry. Oddly enough, everything comes full circle. It's a $175 million acquisition, and some partners and I are working on that. That's been really fun and exciting. We've been working on that for a little while. More exciting is I'm working on a roll up in the home healthcare business. So in the United States, I know in other countries, they don't have, totally different models. But in the United States, there are a number of home healthcare businesses who they're the ones that go into the home. They could be nurses or physical therapists, et cetera. They go into people's homes. They take care of the people, their physical needs, whether it's medical, whether it's therapeutic, et cetera. And there's a very interesting phenomenon happening in that industry. There's about 14,000 home health businesses in the United States right now. And most of them were started by nurses who were tired of the typical hospital environment, and they wanted to start a business and be able to provide more personalized care, be able to take care of people in their homes, which is what people want. They don't want to go to the hospital. Again, listening to the customer, right? So, and a lot of these people have started their businesses, and it's a grind. It is a tough business. And with the COVID pandemic, it has been made even more difficult. So there are a lot of these business owners who started their companies, again, 5, 6, 10 years ago, and they are getting burnt out. And I literally have had conversations with owners of these home healthcare businesses. These are owners of a $3 or $4 million business who are on the phone, driving down the road, talking to me on the phone. Their entire patient roster is on the seat of their entire company is on the seat of their car in file folders, and they're having to try and do their billing and run the business between taking care of patients, because they shouldn't be taking care of patients, but getting people, people don't show up for work, and this patient has to be seen, and so they wind up out in the field. It's a tough business. And so we believe that we can do it a lot better. We believe that we can provide through efficiencies of systems, and especially through 360-degree analysis of our goal is to have the entire system automated, platformed, so that every interested party has an app that provides us continual and constant feedback. So the patient has an app. Was your caregiver on time today? What services did your caregiver provide? Were there any problems with your caregiver? There's a big problem with abuse with home health care and with elder care and nursing homes and things like that. One of the ways we want, and they're underreported. Patients are afraid to report it. So we're building into that system a way of identifying any problems we might have with any employees that don't require the patient to actually tell us. We have indicators in the way we're framing the question. So also, almost every patient in a home healthcare environment also has somebody tied to them who's the real customer. So in our world, it's oftentimes you have a patient who's, an 85-year-old who's, at home with multiple diseases. The customer is their offspring. So it could be the 55-year-old executive who has plenty of money and plenty of desire to take care of their parents, but doesn't have the time. So they're bringing us into the fold to kind of replace that. Well, guess what? They're part of that process too. They become part of that 360-degree assessment. We want to understand, when they're talking to their mom or their dad, are they getting the care they need? We're asking for feedback from them. And then of course, all of the care providers are all digitized. So we're going to modernize and streamline this process so that the owners of these home healthcare businesses don't have to be so stressed out of running a very inefficient business. They can get the billing off of their hands. They can get all the paperwork off their hands, and they can go back to doing what they wanted to do in the first place, which was provide quality care to patients.
Yeah.
And when I've told this story to companies that we're in negotiations with to acquire, I don't know why I make a lot of people cry. I've literally had people weep with just like, oh, the weight this would lift off my shoulders.
Yeah.
That's what I've needed. And so, so we've secured a $30 million commitment to begin that. Our goal is to build a national brand in the home healthcare space. And that's the first phase of it. So we are very aggressively looking for home healthcare businesses to partner with and acquire, as well as technology platforms and other back office support to help us grow that business and grow that over the next couple of years. So that's one thing that we're spending a lot of our time and energy on right now. Very fun, very exciting. And then the last thing I'm working on is I own multiple marketing agencies. So digital marketing, radio marketing, TV, advertising, direct mail, you name it. And one of the things I'm working on is consolidating and looking for more marketing agencies to roll up into one big agency. And we're looking to make it a multinational platform. So right now we've got, we're very actively seeking agencies in Canada and the UK, and just beginning some conversations in Australia. And so, and we're looking to roll all that up into one, one efficient brand. So I got a lot going on.
Wow, it's exciting times.
But it's fun stuff. So yeah, if anybody has a home healthcare business they know of that the owners might need some help, or an advertising or marketing agency that would be interested in either a minority or majority investment, that's what we're working on right now.
I'll have to link you after we recorded. I'll have to link you with a friend of mine who's involved in healthcare, and from a slightly different stance. But I think you guys could really hit it off because you're both in the same area. So I will do that after. Okay, thank you for that. As you say, exciting times. Okay, so we're coming to the end of the interview. I asked the same 6 questions to all of my guests.
All right.
They're quick-fire questions. They don't need quick-fire answers. It's up to you. And I've been told that they're thought-provoking. So,
all right. Well, so far you've asked some very thought-provoking questions, so I have high expectations.
Thank you. First question is, what's the best decision that you've made?
Oh, geez. Best decision that I've made. Best decision that I've made is ensuring for the last several years that I take. Now, this is a very American answer. So
Okay.
ensuring for the last several years that I take at least 40 days a year of vacation, which is very anti-American. That's very
it's unheard of in the US.
It's unheard of in the United States, but I am so much more efficient and productive and creative and effective when I've gone off the grid for a few days here and there. So so that's probably, and that's tough to do in the United States. We don't have the same philosophy around all that as the Europeans do.
Yeah, we like our holidays.
Yeah.
What's the best piece of advice you've been given?
Oh, that one's easy. So Zig Ziglar, back when I was a wee lad, you can have anything in life you want as long as you help enough other people get what they want. And I have practiced a model of servant leadership ever since then, and it has served me well.
Awesome. Who's the person that's helped you most in your career?
Opal Singleton. So when I was that minimum wage call center worker, I was even when I was on the phones, I was one of the top salespeople. So I had my name on all these kind of plaques along this hallway, and she was that's a crazy story. She had just her assistant had just quit, and so she was walking down the hall thinking, where am I going to find another assistant? I got to go through the whole process of interviewing and the whole thing. She's walking down the hall and she's seeing my name in that of the corner of her eye, subliminally, really. Just I keep seeing the same name on all these plaques. So she stopped and looked at the name. She walked into the big call center room and said, who's this Marty guy? Is he here? And so they came and got me, and she looks at me now. Okay, picture this. I'm 18 or 19? I was 18 years old. I was 19 years old. I was wearing a Van Halen concert t-shirt. Awesome. I had, raggedy torn jeans and super long hair. And she looks me up and down. And instead of judging, going, this kid can't work on the executive floor with me, she said, are you interested in a job? And I said, yeah, sure. So she said, all right, come upstairs.
Did you know who she was at that time?
I knew that she was a bigwig. Okay. Right. One of the bigwigs.
Yeah.
So she said, all right, come upstairs. So I worked with her for the rest of that day. This was at like lunchtime. So I worked with her for like 3 or 4 hours. And at the end of the day, she said, do you want to do this all the time? And I'm like, yes, I do. And she goes, okay, I'll see you at 8:00 tomorrow morning. I went home. I got a haircut. I got some new clothes. I showed up the next morning and I was presentable. And all she did was, she had glasses. Like, all she did was kind of look at me like this and look at me up and down, nodded her head and said, all right, let's get to work. And she has been such a huge influence on me. I've never seen a woman with so much energy, so much brilliance. She taught me, she was my, you asked back to the beginning of this interview, you asked about my education. She gave me my education because she taught me things about selling multi-million-dollar contracts that I never could have learned anywhere else. I eventually left her employee. That's when I got into the real estate thing and kind of blah, blah. And then she called me up several years later and said, hey, I've got this company. I think it could be something. I need you to come help me grow this. And that was the company that we built from 0 to 300 million in 3 years. That was her and I did that together. So I worked with her twice. And so I always credit her for giving a, long-haired rock and roll teenager a break and not judging that book by its cover. And I owe so much to her and the things that she taught me over the years. And today I'd like to give a shout out. So she runs an organization called Million Kids, which is an anti-human trafficking organization located in Riverside County, California, millionkids.org. And she flies around the world and this is the last 12 or 15 years of her life. And she's in her, I'm not going to guess her age. She's not, okay, forget it.
She won't appreciate it.
She'll yell at me, but she'll smile. She literally flies around the world saving children, rescuing children, both in the United States and abroad. She's spent time in Thailand and Vietnam, and her work today is so incredibly valuable. Millionkids.org. Please, if you're watching this interview, go to the website and give her some financial support, because they're a very shoestring organization that's doing huge things and impacting lives around the world.
That's amazing. If you give me the details, I'll drop it into my show notes, and so we can be.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I'll send you the URL.
Next question. Do you have any regrets?
No. I am blessed to be where I am. I love what I do. I have been blessed to have a career that has been fun and profitable and inspiring to others, inspiring to my kids who are mostly entrepreneurs. Almost all my children are entrepreneurs. I've certainly not made all the right decisions. I've certainly not done all things, but my failures have created who I am today and made my successes even bigger.
Fantastic. Great answer. What are you most proud of?
Whatever I'm doing next.
Fantastic. And what does legacy mean to you?
So at the beginning, circling back to the beginning of this interview, you had a difficult time pronouncing my name.
I do apologize.
And that's because it's a very unique name.
Right.
I am the only Well, first of all, if you have the name Fahncke, Fahncke, and you're in the United States, you're in some branch of my family, which there aren't a lot of them. Most of them are in Ohio. There's a few in Utah. And there's only one Marty Fahncke in the entire world.
Wow.
So if you Google my name, that's me. Whatever you find, it's me.
Right.
Years ago, my grandfather had a construction business, and he was a very prominent contractor in a reasonably small town. And everybody knew who he was, and everybody knew his name, and the homes he built were of good quality. My dad had a mechanic shop who he took care of people's cars and serviced them, and was proud of his legacy. And my dad pulled me aside one time and said, the only people with our last name in this entire state are members of our immediate family. And, your grandfather started this company when he got home from World War II in 1946. And this was this was years ago, but in many years. So the name means something. And if you screw up for all of us. And that's stuck with me to this day. And so I have tried in every way I can to leave a legacy with my name for my children, my grandchildren, etc. Have I been perfect? Absolutely not. But I've tried, and I'm very proud to say that if you Google me, you'll get thousands of results, and not one of them will be negative.
Okay, so two follow-up questions. Is your dad still with us? And
Yes.
The second question, okay, fantastic. So you still got the memory of him sort of saying that to you. And have you had that same question have you said that question to your kids as well?
Yes, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I've had that talk without question. It had such an impact on me as a kid.
Yeah.
I want to have the same impact on them. So
fantastic.
Not everybody is blessed with a unique name that, is tied to them, but everybody is still leaving some sort of legacy, and you need to be thinking about what that legacy is. And so that's mine. Is I want to leave, I want to leave a good name for the generations to come.
Fantastic. And you've mentioned it a couple of times, and where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
Adventuristmarketing.com would be the best place to go. Adventuristmarketing.com. It's my website. It's got lots of information on there, and my contact page and everything else.
Excellent. Thank you, Marty. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today.
You as well, Mark. Thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot. Cheers. Bye.